So I've had this YouTube channel for a little while, and I've posted, nothing really substantial. But after a ride with a buddy today and listening to his story, I decided that I would give it a shot. I figured, I could at least show what I've done. Maybe that will help somebody else. I know there's a lot of people out there that are really big into riding, and there's also a group that's big into riding, but more of what I like to call the B side of riding. Mostly, commuting, touring, ones who build up bikes, tried to figure out ways to make things work, not using mainstream parts, sometimes using specialty parts, smaller companies, and just trying to build the bike up to how they want the bike. And that's what I'm going to try to focus on. Want to focus on, things that I've done, things that I've come across, how I built this bike up. And this was actually something that kind of fell into my lap. Originally, I had a Specialized A-Wall Elite, used it for about 8 years. I probably had close to 20,000 miles on it before the frame cracked. It cracked by the rear derailleur hanger, and where it bolts into the frame. And so every time I rode, the frame would flex and the chain would start rubbing real bad up on the front derailleur. And I know a lot of people would say, hey, it's a steel bike, why don't you weld it back? 2 reasons I didn't. One was it was in a really weird spot, which they could have probably welded it back, but I don't know. And then the second was I kind of felt like the bike was done. Like I've had my run with that bike. And it was time to move on to something different. So what I eventually landed on was this Surly Bridge Club. The reason I picked it was the closest as far as A-wall. The head tube was a little shorter, but everything else, and the top tube I think was maybe half an inch longer. I don't know, I've measured it several times. Sometimes it looks like it's almost the same, but even going online, it's minimal. So, and plus about 90% of the parts, at least I thought 90% of the parts I had would fit. Came out to be more like 70%, and then there was a whole lot of issues trying to get the front derailleur to work. So the main issue on the bike was that my A-Wall ran a compact road crank. I think it was 4634, and the Surly Bridge Club will only run up to a 44 tooth up front, and that is only with a triple. So if you go double, it's only 40. So I still wanted to get the higher range, gear range on my bike, but I couldn't fit a 46 tooth crankset on there, so I opted for a 44 triple, which was, I think, is 44 34 22. I believe that's how the chain rings go. And it wasn't a bad deal because I've always wanted a triple. I think I'm more on that old school side where I like the triple frame. Triple crankset. And so it wasn't that bad of a deal. So, but the issue I ran into was the front derailleur. So I was running Tiagra shifters up front on my drop bars. I had Tiagra front derailleur. And obviously, if you're running a trekking crank, as this is, or a mountain bike crank, if you want to call it that, you can't use road equipment. So you can't use a road front derailleur and make it work with a mountain bike crankset. And that's because of the spacing. I think it's like 5 millimeters more. So it wouldn't shift right. So the main issue I ran into is the Tiagra front derailleur, which I was running a double front derailleur, which obviously that wouldn't work. Eventually I moved to a triple Tiagra front derailleur thinking that it would work, but the issue was that it wouldn't push far enough up on the crank to get it onto the top chainring, unless I pulled that cable really tight and then kind of flexed the front derailleur out a little bit with maybe a pair of pliers or whatever, and then it would work for a little bit, but eventually that cable would loosen up and then it wouldn't go back up to the front derailleur. Up to the front chainring. So what I eventually opted for was a mountain bike front derailleur. So this is the one I have on there now. It is a SHIMANO Altus M371 9-speed front derailleur running on this Alivio crankset. So this is where I finally ended up. But between the Tiagra and the Altus, I got a microshift triple front derailleur. But the issue with the microshift, which you'll find a lot of issues with mountain bike front derailleurs, is that the majority of the pull mechanism is on the back side, right where the seat tube is. So what happens is the derailleur starts to rub up against, well, at least in this early bridge club, starts to rub up against the fender that I've got here. So I've got Velo orange fenders, and it was basically, I couldn't even fit it in there. So I had to nix that quickly, and then eventually got this Altus front derailleur, which you can see, if you look real closely, there's not much room at all. And initially there was no room, but there is a small cable guide on the front derailleur, which you can't see really well, that would rub up against the fender. So I ended up taking a grinder and grinding a little bit of that away. And now if I'm all the way down in the smallest chain ring, there's probably a millimeter, maybe 2 of clearance, but it works. Actually it shifts very smoothly. The other issue I ran into, obviously, if you're running a mountain bike front derailleur, does not work with the the Tiagra drop bar shifters. And obviously the bridge club is made for straight bars and not drop bars, but everybody loves drop bars, right? So I eventually had to figure that out and landed on the Gevenalle shifters, which basically puts index or friction shifting towards the front on the brake levers. They're Tektro front brake levers, and they will basically work with anything. So I actually love them. Probably do a review or go over these at some point, but they work very well with the front and rear derailleur. That being said, you can see that sometimes you have to go through several different pieces of equipment to get where you're trying to go. Sometimes it's not so easy. With the triple chain ring kind of disappearing, it's getting harder and harder to find parts for that. And then with frame issues like with the bridge club here, the chainstay is very short for a touring bike, which is great because it climbs up hills really, really well, and there's still enough room where you have plenty of hill clearance with panniers, but then trying to squeeze this derailleur in there, it made it an issue. And then you might be wondering, okay, so from what you've told me, you've purchased 4 derailleurs. Well, actually 3 derailleurs, because the other one was the one that was on the A wall. I did. Luckily, front derailleurs are not very expensive, 20, maybe 30 bucks. But what I do is, if it doesn't work, I just resell it, usually on eBay, yeah, I lose some money, but I get some money back, right? So, you know, it's not so bad. And I don't need a bunch of spare parts laying around. Before you know it, you got tons of spare parts, and then what do you do with them? Usually, you know, end up giving to the bike co-op and let them use it to you know, build up bikes for people who need bikes, and everybody needs a bike, right? So one more thing, the front derailleur here is a dual pull, so I could have pulled it from the top. I decided actually to pull it from the bottom. So let's see if we can walk through this real quick. So obviously shifter derailleur cable comes down this way, and then the way it's designed is it would stop right about here, and then your front derailleur would have an adjuster knob, and then you would put the cable down in there, and it would pull it from the top. Now the problem is the derailleur that they recommend, or that you should get for this, is very hard to find. I think it's an XT, Shimano XT, and then once you do get it, you run into that same issue where there's not enough clearance back here to make it fit. So what I opted for is I actually ran the cable all the way down, and we'll see if you can see this. Let's see if we can get a better shot over this side. Anyway, let's see. I got a pulley down there. Let's try one more time here. Let me get my phone and see if that works. All right, maybe that will work. Let's see. So I've got a pulley down there at the bottom. There it is. All right, it took a minute, but we got it. It's a problem solver front derailleur pulley, and then I basically have a cable stop adapter right there. You can get those eBay, $10 maybe. I think the pulley was maybe $26, maybe $20, a little bit more expensive than I would think it should be, but whatever. And then I just basically wrapped it around that, came up through the derailleur, and then I'm pulling it from the bottom. So it seems to work really well. It's smooth. I don't see any cable fray. Got housing almost all the way down. So it works. It works really well. Honestly, I like the way this bike shifts better than I like my road bike, like I said before. So also I'm a little bit more prone to the heavier bikes. They feel a bit more solid on the road, even though you can't go as fast, right? So weight, speed, all that shenanigans. So anyway, that's where we are on the front derailleur. Just wanted to go over it, and next time I'll explore something else. Thanks for taking a look.